Hello there, day one of the public inquiry. It felt a little like Groundhog Day, repeating our performance from January 2025. So to set the scene, there was a fair amount of press outside the Strual Arts where we were interviewed, and there was much clicking of cameras, and of course the yellow umbrellas with no toxic mining on them were very much in evidence. Play started at 10 a.m, everyone dutifully taking up their positions. And as usual, we're referred to as the third party. Musing quietly to myself as I'm waiting for things to start, wondering why do the public get designated the third party at a public inquiry? It feels a little derogatory. Anyways, we kicked off with an explanation of the role of the Commission and sundry housekeeping. A statutory objection was quickly lodged by one of the third parties as to the confirmation that the public inquiry is run in line within statutory framework legislation, and this was duly noted. This was followed quickly by an inquiry if state bodies were invited from the Republic of Ireland, and the answer was a resounding no. Another third-party representative wanted to know if it was a reconvened inquiry or a new inquiry, and this was quickly pointed out that it was a reconvened inquiry. And then we start to get into the nitty-gritty. The barrister for FODC, Fermanagh and Omagh District Council, referred to a series of files, 95 in total, which were released as recently as March 2026 on the planning portal. As to what their status was, questioning whether they were admissible, and further asking how they will be dealt with in the context of the inquiry. He said the new information meant people had not been given the reasonable time to respond that they should be allowed under law. Northern Ireland Environmental Agency stated that the significant volume of new information was submitted as part of the transboundary consultation undertaken by the Stormont Department for Infrastructure DFI last year. The agency said it was assessing, but given the volume of new information, NIEA would not now prepare a draft Habitat Regulation Appropriate Assessment, HRAA, in advance of the inquiry, suggesting that it could be bolted on at the end after the Planning Appeals Commission had made their decision. Mr. Fagan then made two salient points. One, has a decision been made on the acceptability of this evidence? And two, is this process fair? I know over the last month, with everything else going on, that Save Our Sperrins were only able to give cursory attention to these new documents in the final rundown to the public inquiry. In my mind, it does not feel fair, but what do I know? Well, this conversation was batted forward and back and continued on and off up until lunchtime. After lunch, the Planning Appeals Commission came back with the decision they would let us know on Tuesday what the outcome of this would be, saying that DFI were responsible for transboundary consultation submissions. The rest of the afternoon proceeded with questions around processings and parameters, as in mine processes, that is. There was a question about the different figures in the application given for the amount of tonnage coming out of the mine over a given period. The barrister for Dalradian managed to get this kicked up the road to later in the public inquiry proceedings, muttering something about there was no intention to exceed the limits. Another question was reasonable to ask as to why some of the assessments of EIA was based on 20 years and others over 25 years. There was a whole discussion about a P1B form and that it was out of date. This form is an outline used to establish what has been mined for and what has been granted, as the original form makes no mention of tellurium. Fidelma O'Kane said it should be a new application. Dr. Amy Strecker made the point that if it's not known yet which ore will be extracted or used, how will that affect the economic argument? How do we determine what this is based on? There were questions around drawings showing where exploratory tunnel will be on the plan. And it was explained to us that the exploratory tunnels were in the area outlined in blue. And it was further explained that this blue area stretched all the way from Greencastle to Ruski, with the understanding that mining could take place under people's houses and folk would not necessarily know about it or be able to do anything about it. The afternoon finished with a whole conversation around who's responsible for monitoring and enforcement of the mine. Basically, who foots that bill. Fermanagh and Omagh District Council made it very clear that they were not going to do it. We were told it was to be a shared responsibility of the DFI and the NIEA. This caused a few raised eyebrows around the place because we all know what happens to a shared responsibility. Somebody can always blame the other. The day was busy. There was a lot covered. It was actually quite exhausting when I think back about it, trying to follow the whole conversation. It was interesting to note that there were 5 tables of people representing communities from around the Sperrins. And given that the proceedings are not available online, we are not allowed to record them, nor is there a transcript. It is hugely important that we are able to be there. Unfortunately, some of us are, but others had to come and go. One mum left with her 3 children because she couldn't attend online, and at that point the children had had enough. And she made that very clear. The fact that there isn't a transcript available of proceedings it feels odd. Why wouldn't there be a transcript? And it just doesn't feel right. And there's nothing we can do about it. Yeah, I think that's all I've got to say about it for now.